Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guest today is Mick Wienholt. Mick has a podcast called Where You Look. On his show, he has guests tell stories from their own lives where they saw God move in incredible ways. I love the premise of his show. I love the honesty and the raw stories that people are sharing, and I think it's just so powerful what he's doing. He shared some important stories with me today, some big things that happened in his life. He was very honest and vulnerable about them both, and he saw what God was doing through these incredible things. I love his show. I think you need to go listen to it if you want to be encouraged. If you're curious how God is moving and what he's doing, listen to some of these stories. Thanks for being here. Mick, I'm so excited to talk to you. As I mentioned, I think what you're doing, the premise of your podcast is incredible. And so I'm very excited to hear how you got started with When You Look. It's all over everywhere. People know what it is, what it's called.
Yeah.
But tell me about your podcast and why you got started doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, Shara, first off, Life Stories is a really cool show as well. So thank you for having me on and for the really neat work that you're doing also.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, 1000%. When You Look has a genesis back in 2018 or so, and there's a tiny bit of backstory. And that was, I really felt like it was either 2018 or 2019 that I kind of got this deposit. Okay. There was this imprint in me that essentially was one word, and it was testimonies.
Mhm.
And it was very clear to me that this was coming from outside of me, that it was coming from God. And it became what I kind of described, sure, as a thing. Okay. And I was never a guy with a thing. And what I mean by thing is, the type of thing, if you will. Okay, we're defining this incredibly nebulously, but the type of thing that your friend would be like, oh yeah, that's their thing. That's why they've started a nonprofit. You know what I mean? Like the
Right.
type of thing that someone is impassioned about.
Mhm.
And I'd never had one of those. I wasn't interested in one of those. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden I had a thing, and it was just one word: testimonies. And then not that long after it, now this is a handful of years ago, so I don't remember exactly when, but then what later came with it was Revelation 12:11, which is that they'll overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimonies, and they will not love their life so much as to shrink from death. And I'm like, okay, this is it began to be enough of a thing that I had to have a conversation with my wife, okay?
Mhm.
Because I literally thought, "Hmm, I might actually have to do something with this thing."
Yeah.
Okay? Now, for me, it wasn't like, "Oh, now I'm gonna start a nonprofit," right? But
Right.
it was something. And
Yeah.
so I end up, chatting with my wife about it, and it almost seemed like a confession in a way. I was like, "Honey, like, you're not gonna believe this, but out of nowhere, I have this thing. That's not me, and I'm telling you, I didn't make this up," you know?
Right.
And, she's like, "Okay, well, like, kinda duly noted." So, like, we'll just see what happens. And, in 2019, I got invited to go to a mission trip in 2020 to Niger, Africa.
Oh, wow.
So, fast forward now to February of 2020, 2-ish weeks before everything shuts down globally due to
Right.
COVID. And I'm in Niger, Africa for a week. And we're doing kind of typical mission type of work of working with feeding programs, visiting various orphanages and loving on the kids and all of that type of stuff. And each evening we would debrief the day. And then we would have some individual time with God while worship music was playing. And we did all of this on the rooftop of the building that we were staying in.
Wow.
And so what ended up happening was, probably the third night or so that we were there, we break off into our individual spaces on this rooftop. There's about a dozen or so of us, and the rooftop is I don't know, half the size of a football field. I mean, you're in a decent sized building, right? So everybody has their own space,
Right.
but you can, and it's dark, right? But and you can tell that that other people are there, but they're completely not in your business, basically.
Right.
And I end up having what I describe as a face-to-face interaction with God. Okay. I
Wow.
didn't see God, but as the worship music is playing, and I distinctly remember it was actually the Leland version of Waymaker.
Oh, wow.
As that song was playing, God said to me, "You're my guy for testimonies."
Wow.
And my response was, "I'm not your guy." And he said a second time, he goes, "You're my guy for testimonies." And I was like, "I'm not your guy. There's gotta be somebody else." And it was very much what I call my Moses moment because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't have a brother named Aaron, but I'm like, there's there's gotta be somebody else. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? I'm not your guy for testimonies. And then the third time he said it, I just relented and I was like, okay, I have no idea what this means,
Right.
but I'll do it. And so come back from Niger, spin up a prototype pilot for an app where people would submit their testimonies. At least this was the concept of it. They would submit their testimonies into the app, and there'd be some type of like cap on it, like 2-minute
Right.
testimony type of thing, right? And then we'd let the technology subtitle it and or translate it so that, somebody in Brazil can hear my English in their Portuguese or
Wow.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
That never really got off the ground very far. And then all kinds of stuff happened, as you know, in
Right.
2020. And so I would say the wind fell out of those sales. It
Mhm.
came back into the sales related to testimonies in 2023, and it came back in the form of a podcast. We filmed a pilot episode, and in this case, it was going to be co-hosted by my sister and I. She
Mhm.
was at the time hosting a radio show in Baltimore. And I was like, Sister Bear, like, you're perfect for this. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm like, you literally are already on the radio. Like, why don't we co-host this? We'll have a male female perspective on stuff. And eventually that didn't end up going anywhere.
Mm.
But she was instrumental in the name because as we were talking through various stories that we were each aware of that would make
Yeah.
sense for the show that we were interested in creating to kind of honor testimonies, if you will,
Yeah.
I was emphatic about a particular story. I'm like, listen about how amazing this story is. And she was sharing emphatically about this other amazing story. And I was like, man, God is in all of these amazing, crazy, wild, wonderful stories.
Yeah.
And I just kind of trailed off. And she goes, yeah, when you look. And
Wow.
so she was just saying like, yeah, he's in everything, but you kinda gotta be looking for it, right?
Right.
And I was like, "That's it.
Yeah.
That's literally the name of the
That's
show,
awesome.
When You Look." Yeah. So we had some subsequent conversation, and she said, "Listen, I don't have any capacity to run with this, but you should."
Yeah.
And, as it then went, I was like, "Okay, well, I thought more about it and nothing really kind of got rolling because, Shara, what ended up happening was when you have, as you know, a name for something, okay,
Mhm.
in the modern age, the first thing that you want to do is go figure out, can you have the website that goes with your name,
Right.
right? I mean, that's
Right.
quite literally what it is. And now maybe the second thing is like the YouTube handle or the Instagram handle or something, but like
Right.
you gotta have your .com or your .org to go along
Mhm.
with your name. And when you look.com and when you look.org were not available.
Oh gosh. Bummer.
So, yeah, exactly. So it was literally like, mm, wind falls out of the sails.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll land this plane here pretty quickly, but in 2025, at the beginning of the year, January, I am in the process of transitioning from company A to company B. Okay. I'm a sales executive in the global space, okay, doing international sales, that type of thing. And so since I'm at executive levels, there's formality to these
Sure.
things. They are negotiated, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I sign my offer letter, which of course has been reviewed by legal departments and all of this other
Yeah.
stuff. I signed that on a Sunday. That's how eager we were all to get this kind of moving,
Right.
right? I resign the next day, which is a Monday.
Mhm.
And by the following Thursday, so 4 days later, the job offer is rescinded
Oh,
and
no.
the entire thing has blown up. Now, Shara, my wife and I have been
No.
praying for
Yeah.
months for God to make a way for us to leave company A, or for me to leave
Yep.
company A, right? And we knew this was him,
Right.
right? Because these are reviewed by legal departments. People can make decisions that
Sure.
easily grease the tracks, make stuff happen. And this was just one roadblock after another, even though everything looked like it was going to be good. And we were like, this is God. Like, it was no question to
Right.
us about it.
Yeah.
So we prayed fervently about it, decided that we were going to, in faith, just kind of step forward, because the company that I was leaving said, "We don't want you to leave. You can stay." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, this is an answer to prayer of, please make a way for us to leave."
Right.
And so we stepped out in faith. And so that was a Friday
Mm.
when I had a conversation with the leaders there, and I said, "Thank you for the opportunity to stay, but I'm not going to do that." Okay.
Right.
And I fully thought, I'll have another job in 3 weeks.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I roll into, so that was a Friday. I'm chatting with friends of mine, chatting with my buddy, and he says, "Hey man, this is definitely a great opportunity for us to do a 3-day fast. Let's see what God
Interesting.
wants to do with all of this." I was like,
Sure.
"Hey, great idea," right? I'd fasted before for health reasons, but I'd not done any spiritual fasting, even though I was certainly familiar with it
Sure.
from the scriptural sense. So roll into a 3-day fast. And on Wednesday morning, okay, so it's Monday,
Mhm.
Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday morning, in my block of prayer that morning, God tells me, sit and wait, complete surrender, full trust. And
Mm.
the sit and wait, Shara, meant stop looking for work.
Yeah.
And through more prayer and other things, he actually communicated to me, you need to do when you look.
Mm.
So what ended up happening was, a handful of weeks before that, he prompted me, totally unrelated to any of this, but he prompted me to be thinking about a podcast for some of the leadership that I was doing at our church. And that prompted me as well to go back to the internet and
Yeah.
just maybe whenyoulook.com is available.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
3 weeks later, he's saying, stop looking for work,
Yeah.
go do when you look. And so that's really kind of how it launched. I fully
Mhm.
thought I'd launch it off the side of my desk, like also working. And so for about another 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I would ask God, maybe every other day, every 3 days or so, can I start looking for work now? Because it really felt like I was just being put in timeout. Like, "Hey,
Right.
on the steps, you need a timeout, you can get up in 5 minutes." Okay.
Right.
That's what I thought this was. And no exaggeration one bit.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit revealed to me, this was actually during another fast and
Mm.
during a prayer block. He said, "Shut your mouth and stop asking me about this in prayer.
Wow.
Sit and wait means sit and wait." And my response was very similar to yours. I was equal parts excited that he had
Yeah.
been that clear.
Right.
Because that was crystal, and I needed
Yes.
crystal at that point, right? And then I was like, "Oh, I think I have been, like, disrespectful with this." Like,
Right.
he put me in my place, and I was super grateful for that, but then I repented. I was like, "All right, Lord,
Yeah.
thank you for this clarity, I'm sorry. Like, we're not going to talk about this again.
Yeah.
So, When You Look launched episode 1 April 7th of 2025, and episode 45 just dropped as
Awesome.
you and I are recording things.
Yeah.
And by his grace, and I mean by his grace and providence alone, I have more than 80 total episodes either scheduled or recorded.
That's awesome.
And what is so phenomenal about that, just for all of the listeners that may have some question about When You Look, it's a show that focuses primarily on ordinary people sharing their firsthand extraordinary experiences.
Right.
So occasionally I'll share some stuff, and a lot of times it's of the similar theme. But my point in bringing it up in that way is that I can't manufacture an episode.
Right.
And people don't walk around with their hand raised saying, "Hey, I got a great God story for you." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's been wonderful to see how God has provided
That's amazing.
with those episodes, because it was only him that could do it.
Oh, absolutely. I completely believe that. And there are times in our lives when I've said, I am not this creative. Like, there's no way I could make this up because I'm just not that creative. I'm not that smart. There's no way. So, your first episode, was it a story about you? Was it somebody else that shared? Do you remember the first one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, no, just folks that we knew. They had
Yeah.
an absolutely amazing story. I was incredibly reluctant to ever share any of the stories that God had written in our lives
Yeah.
for fear of my pre-relationship with Jesus
Yeah.
version of Mick coming forward, meaning someone that was interested in their ego being stroked and growing.
Right. Right.
So there was tremendous reluctance, and eventually God showed me, he's like, "Buddy, I have written all kinds of stories in your life.
Yeah.
You need to share my stories."
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh, right. They're your stories, God. They're not my stories." Got it. Okay. I'll be glad to share.
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes we're a little thick, sometimes
Oh, yes,
I
indeed.
totally get it. I know there's a story that you share sometimes. There were 2, examples that you gave, but one was about an avalanche that you had to deal with. Would you share a little bit of that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll make this one quick, but
Okay.
I'll take everybody to me being a 19-year-old. I'm 6 feet tall. Okay, the state says that I'm an adult, and I can assure everyone that I am an overgrown child because I am totally fueled by ego and, at the time, Mountain Dew.
There you go.
And, just trying to paint the realistic,
Right,
accurate picture for
right.
everybody. And, I moved from where I was originally from in Baltimore to Colorado. I live in the Front Range, the greater Denver area. Did a lot of hiking, a lot of ice climbing, a lot of mountaineering, and, I climbed many 14,000-foot peaks, and there's a lot of those in Colorado. And I got to the point where I was like, I've done a bunch of things in the roughly year or so that I've lived there, and I want to up the ante. And my ego was saying, you can do things better. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I set out on November 7th of 2000, which some of your listeners will recall that is the day of the hanging Chad. That is
Oh,
election
wow.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, George
I
W. Bush,
remember that
Al
day.
Gore. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise it's just some random day,
Yeah.
right? But when we put it in that context,
Yeah.
that is exactly what it was. So I voted, then ran to the mountains, and my intention was to climb the Lost Rat Couloir on Gray's Peak, which is a 14,000-foot peak. It is right next to, like immediately adjacent to Torrey's Peak. And so most of the time, people climb both of them because they're like just literally moments from each other. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I was going to climb this couloir, and a couloir is sort of like a double black diamond at the top of a ski resort, like a chute of snow. Okay.
Mhm.
And I was ascending up that. I was about 200 to 300 vertical feet up this couloir, up this route, which put me right around 13,000 feet above sea level. And I ended up triggering the avalanche that
Wow.
swept me to the bottom. So my climbing was
Yeah.
disturbing the snow, and that is what triggered the avalanche.
Wow.
So I hear the distinctive whoomph sound, which is the snow settling. I immediately look up the hill and can see the snow starting to come down towards me. I'm climbing here on all fours because it's steep enough that, we're well beyond hiking. And I turned to my left in an attempt to outrun it by running perpendicular to the slide. And I
Yeah.
literally got one step and then was swept off my feet. And as I was swept off my feet, I distinctly remember thinking to myself, this is going to suck for my family, especially my mom.
Mm.
And then the lights went out. So I regained consciousness at the bottom. I am not buried. I'm sitting on a rock
Oh my gosh.
and I'm definitely injured. I
Yeah.
don't know how badly I'm injured, but I know I am definitely injured.
Yeah.
And I did this sort of systems check. I have no idea how long I was unconscious, but when I regained consciousness, I did this systems check and everything kind of seemed like it was a go. And that was sort of the key word for me. I was like,
Yeah.
there's danger here. You need to go. So I hiked the 3 miles back to my car, my pickup
Wow.
truck that was at the trailhead parking lot. And 30 seconds before I walked into that parking lot, a guy by the name of Steve, a complete stranger to me,
Mhm.
showed up. And Steve ended up taking me to the hospital, and all of the king's men put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Wow.
And so let me just describe the miracle here, okay?
Yeah.
So I spent 6 days in the hospital, 3 in intensive care because all of the injuries that I had sustained were to my head.
Oh wow.
My jaw was broken on both sides. My skull was broken in 3 places. On the
Mm.
left-hand side of the break of the skull, it had been shoved forward, putting a bunch of pressure on my auditory nerve, and so for a month, I was completely without hearing in my left ear. And then my scalp was split from just over my right eye all the way to the top back portion of my head.
Oh.
And so Steve described that when we took my jacket off, which I'll describe in a little bit more in a moment and why that's important, we pulled my hood off. And he said at that point, he was looking at my skull. And for all intents and purposes, he said, your ear was basically sitting on your shoulder. Because you got to think, right? That's like a 10 or 11-inch sort of like
Oh my
opening
gosh.
of my head being completely split.
Did you know that? Could you feel that or no?
Not really. So I knew stuff was wrong as I was heading back to the car, especially when I made it back to the trail, because some of what I had to travel was off trail. When I got back to the trail, I was able to do a little bit more of assessing. And I knew something was wrong with my mouth because I kept spitting blood, but I had no
Mm.
idea what,
Yeah.
and blood kept dripping into my right eye.
Mm.
And it was really frustrating because every time I went to address the blood, like wipe it or something, it
Yeah.
just made it worse.
Oh
And
gosh.
so I had to make this conscious decision. And I really remember it because to me at the time it was super odd. And I was like, just let it bleed.
Yeah.
And the significance of that is that when I got to the parking lot, I couldn't get the key that I had bolted to the underside of my pickup truck bed off in order to get into
Mm.
my car. Like I always lock my keys in my car, and the quick reasoning for that is that in the unlikely event that you ever lost your backpack in
Right.
the mountains, right? For some crazy reason, if I could make it back to my truck, at least my keys would be there at my truck and I'd be able
Right.
to get into my,
Yeah.
transportation. And I couldn't get down on the ground, shimmy under, unbolt the key, shimmy back out, and stand back up. And I was like, I had to ask this guy, Steve, who I didn't know his name at the time, for help. And then once he did that and we got my truck opened, I then went to take off my Gore-Tex, like ski type
Yeah.
of jacket, right? And I couldn't get the zipper down. It was stuck at about chest height. So here I am, this strong, athletic 19-year-old at the beginning of this story, And now I am so weak that I cannot get the zipper down on my jacket, particularly because there is so much coagulated blood and other fluids frozen on the front of my jacket.
Gosh.
So I now have to ask this stranger for a second favor, and I have to say to him, and it was so incredibly humbling. And that's why I started with ego, okay? And I'm now using the word. It was so incredibly humbling to say, "Can you help me get my jacket off?"
Yeah.
I mean, think of how many times, you know what I mean?
Right.
In a, we'll call it, I mean, when you're working zippers, we'll just go conservatively, starting from 5, right?
Right.
To 19. That's 14 solid years of working zippers. It's a lot of practice.
You got it down
That's
by then.
exactly. That's the condition I'm in, And he had to break the zipper actually in order to get it
Wow.
off. So if Steve doesn't show up in that parking lot, and this is
Yeah.
really what I'm trying to highlight from the extent of my injuries and the terrible condition that I'm in, if he's not there, I die in that parking lot.
Yeah.
No question.
Wow. That is wild. That is wild. And I can see it and other people can see it, but it makes me sad when people can't see that God provided them. He brought him there. That was not a coincidence. That was totally, totally his hand, which is incredible because here you are to tell us all about it.
Yeah,
What kind of stories do you get excited about from your guests, people that come on your show?
yeah. Man, what a wonderful question. Thank you for the opportunity to answer that.
Sure.
Um, let me give a tiny, tiny little backstory on this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I grew up in a quote unquote Christian household.
Mhm.
Okay. And I grew up inside of religion. And because I didn't really like God's rules and I had no relationship with him, I
Right.
rebelled really hard. Okay. But in this religion that I grew up in, okay, um, it seemed like sin was just like something you tried to avoid,
Yeah.
okay? And it almost seemed like the more sin there is, man, like the worse that person is.
Mhm.
And I think you can kind of pick up what I'm putting down here. Like, it's just this. I mean, it's not exactly ever clearly articulated, but you just kind of get this sense
Yeah.
that, like, some people have less sin and therefore they're sort of like better than people that have more sin.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't roll that way, but that's not what I grew up with, right?
Right.
So, to answer your question, what gets me so excited is when people share on When You Look the absolute depths of sin,
Yeah.
and they talk about it openly, and they're like, "This is who I was. This is what I did. And now I'm not that. I'm
Yeah.
completely and fully and radically different. And the one reason and the one reason only,
Right.
Jesus."
Absolutely.
And it's them saying this, right, with their own mouth from their own experience, and what it's done is it's illuminated for me the reality that when we diminish, or I should say it this way, when we whitewash or don't share the details of the sin,
Yeah.
God's redemptive power is diminished in the story, right? It is not diminished in reality. We know that,
Right.
right? But if you're like, "Oh, yeah, I had a checkered past and now I'm good," right? That
Mhm.
doesn't actually shine the light on what Jesus did to radically transform somebody. But when
Right.
you talk about, "I did this, I did that, this is what I thought," you know what I mean? Like people talking about, "Yeah, I just
Sure.
practiced witchcraft," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, "I was in the homosexual lifestyle." Like there's all kinds of
Right.
amazing things that then they're saying, "And I'm completely different because of Jesus." And the second layer to that for me is also, it is an incredible testament to the character that these people have to talk about stuff that I think most people in the world would be like, man, that's pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm going to be that vulnerable. And people are like, I was a disaster. I'll tell you all about it. And
Yeah.
then I'll tell you about how I'm not now. It's really,
Wait,
really
I love
inspiring.
all of that. It is. I love all of that, and I think it's so important, and once you have been radically changed like that, it's like you can't help it. You can't help it, and so I love that you're giving people a place to share those stories. What is something that you hope people walk away from after they listen to an episode or 80
Mm,
episodes or
yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that there are many other people that are going through, or better scenario, have
Sure.
gone through something really hard, really bad, really painful, whatever it might be. And they are, because of God's grace and his mercy and his healing, they're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of listeners that, like, for most of us, right? We have tragedy at some point in our lives, or many
Oh,
points,
sure.
or we're in the midst of ones,
Yeah.
you know? And so I really get excited about how much hope there is from, again, the firsthand accounts. I mean, these are people that been there, lived it,
Yeah.
were healed, redeemed, whatever it might be, and are just completely different people.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's awesome that you are giving people a place to do that, and I'm excited to listen to episodes and point people to your podcast. What other plans do you have? I know you said you have enough for 80 episodes booked and ready to go. What else? Do you have any other plans that you're doing or just gonna
Yeah,
keep
no,
trucking
this
along?
is the intention is to walk out in obedience what God has for me to do on any given day, and I
Yeah.
ask him that regularly. And for now, it appears that it is when you look,
Yeah.
and he's turned me into a podcaster.
Yes.
Never saw that one coming, but it's been really neat how he's illuminated certain things along the way. And I'll give you just a
Yeah.
funny story, just a funny,
Sure.
funny story, okay? Um, in high school, one of my English teachers said, "Hey, you should try out for the news," because we had this closed circuit television system in our high school
Yeah.
where people from the school did the news. And I'm like, that just seems so out of left field. But for whatever reason, and I didn't have a great relationship with this teacher or anything, but I was just like, all right, I'll try out.
Right.
And I tried out and I did the news for a couple of
Oh, wow.
read the news. Yeah, it was hilarious. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding you, sure. Like I'd like fully, well, maybe not fully, like 98% forgotten about this. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like it's eons ago. And sometime in the last half dozen months, the Holy Spirit said to me, he goes, I've had you
Wow.
looking into a camera and communicating with people since you were 15.
That's wild.
And my jaw just dropped because I'm like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
That way back then
Yeah.
was for today. I mean, no exaggeration. We're
Right.
literally talking 30 years.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I mean, it really showed, among so many other things that he's revealed to me.
Oh, yeah.
His timing is it's
Perfect.
big. Yes, it's certainly perfect, but
Perfect.
it's also big, like
It is.
tall.
It
You
is.
know, I'm like,
Yeah.
how about I don't know, something in the next 90 days? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like that's my timeline, right?
That's the
100
thing.
days is a good timeline. God's like,
Yeah.
dude, I got 100 years easy.
Yeah.
You know?
He is never late, but he is certainly not in a hurry.
Yeah.
Not like I would like for him to be sometimes. That is for sure.
Amen.
Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you wanna share? I love this, I really do, and I'm excited
Mm.
to point people to your podcast.
Well, let me briefly share, since we are on life stories, right? The thing that really actually changed everything.
Mhm.
And I described myself as a 19-year-old and that avalanche, and I really gave God intellectual credit for that.
Right.
Um, Meaning I said, yeah, it was a miracle that Steve was there, but I didn't really understand the gravity of it. And so a handful of years go by, my wife and I get married. We then are a number of years on purpose without having children as a
Mhm.
newly married couple. And then after about 5 or so years of being married, we decide now's the time to start a family. And we got pregnant right away. We knew many people that didn't, and so we were
Yeah.
grateful for that. But we didn't see that as a blessing because we were distinctly not in relationship with God, period.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And all progressed really well with the pregnancy.
Mhm.
The due date for our son was January 11th of 2012.
Mm.
And exactly 1 week before that due date, so 39 weeks gestationally,
Yeah.
I come back from walking our dogs. My wife is standing in the kitchen crying, and I said to her, "Honey, what's up?" And she says, "I haven't felt him move since
Mm.
last night." We went to labor and delivery at that point, and 3 ultrasound techs, 3 ultrasound machines, and 1 MD to finally tell us what at that point we pretty much knew. And he
Yeah.
said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your baby no longer has a heartbeat."
Mm.
And the reason that I'm sharing that for everybody is because up to that point in my life, I'm 31,
Yeah.
and up to that point, every challenge that I had ever come up against, I was able to solve on my own, quote unquote, on my own. Okay.
Sure.
Maybe a little grit, little tenacity, little time, little teaching or learning from somebody, little help, little mentoring. You know what I mean? But on the whole, Mick
Yeah.
got it done. And in that room, I realized this is beyond me. I
Yeah.
can't fix this. So my wife, we're of course both overwhelmed with the grief.
Yeah.
She says, "Hey, I want to go to the bathroom." I'm like, "I'll go with you." So I help her over to down the hallway to the bathroom. And we all know those hospital bathrooms where it's one toilet and the
Right.
giant door and then
Right.
this cavernous room, right? So she goes in, close the door. I'm in the hallway and I'm just physically overwhelmed by the weight of the emotion of grief. I'm
Yeah.
on my knees, not in a spiritual sense, just crushed from the emotion of
Mhm.
grief. And I cried out to God. I cried out to God in desperation and I said, "I need you." And it is that moment, Shara, that I
Mhm.
began a relationship with Jesus Christ. And
Yeah.
that was 14 years ago. And in that moment, he radically changed me
Yeah.
and then incrementally has changed things since.
Wow.
And so my wife delivers our son Luke, 6 pounds, 8 ounces, 21 inches long.
Mhm.
She delivers him the next day because we started the induction meds and all of that type of stuff. And it just takes a while for that to
Yeah.
all work through. So our first pregnancy ends in a full term stillbirth.
Mhm.
And yet we look at that as the single most tangible blessing that we have ever received from God because it changed our lives for eternity because it
Yeah.
brought us in a relationship with Jesus. And then it has changed our family tree because
Yeah.
we have 3 living children and one of them is old enough. She's accepted Jesus as her savior.
That's
And
awesome.
the other 2 are very aware of God.
Yeah.
And, we pray that they too will get the prompting
Yeah.
and accept Jesus into their hearts. So, excuse me,
And
he changed everything with
yeah.
Luke's death. And we could never have made that decision ourselves. And we're grateful though that he made it.
That's amazing. And one day you will see him again.
Amen.
Yes. I so appreciate you sharing all that you did. This has been great.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure,
Absolutely.
truly.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks.
All right. Bye bye.